here about a year and a half ago, this issue of schooling, especially on the K through 12 level, and the parental involvement, the new parental interest in that schooling. Who's pushing back on them? Well, you may or may not be surprised by this. Matt joins us now here on KWTO. Matt, good morning. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Matt, did I get your last name right, or did I completely screw that up?
No, you nailed it.
Oh, very good. All right. Hey, so Matt, you are the Director of Education Policy over at the Goldwater Institute, and you've got a brand new article up that has been published at the Washington Times. Mainstream media fuel war on parents by misleading on teachers' curriculum transparency. Matt, we've got these awesome parental groups that have popped up here in Springfield, Missouri, all across the Show Me State as well. Parents are running for school boards, but Matt, they've run into not only maybe an enemy they expected to run into, the teachers' unions and their ilk, but certain members of the media are trying to lend a hand to push back on parents as well, haven't they?
Yeah, that's right. They have, especially on this issue of transparency. So, we've got obviously a lot of parent energy. We've seen since COVID, when parents had a chance to see what was being taught in their kids' classes with Zoom, and having a lot of questions, concerns around, super political, racialized instruction that's going on. So now there are bills across 20 states or more in the country that are going to give parents a chance to actually see what's being taught. Very simple. It's a policy that we at Goldwater helped pioneer. Now states around the country pick it up that says, hey, look, we're in the 21st century. Why don't we have our public schools post online a list of the materials that are actually being used so that parents can see that? Very simple curriculum transparency laws. And now not only have the teachers unions, but the media have come out full force to try and block these efforts, essentially lining up behind the unions and the talking points of the education establishment that are trying to essentially keep parents in the dark.
And Matt, we expect it from the large corporate national media outlets. We know whose side they always take on that. They take the side of the establishment, especially the center left or far left establishment. We're used to those talking points. But Matt, there's also this movement, and we've seen it here in Missouri. I think it all emanates from this state newsroom project. I don't know if you've been covering that, a quote, nonprofit network of state-based outlets with a national bureau in Washington. Matt, we've got one here in Missouri called the Missouri Independent. I know they have one in Kansas called the Kansas Reflector, I believe. These seem to be far left-wing outlets kind of cloaked in the mantra of, we're just local news reporters.
Yeah, again, we've seen so much of journalism, unfortunately, sort of get hijacked into, really just a mouthpiece of the left. And we're seeing that at both the state and national level. And so, we've seen outlets in Arizona and Florida across the country of them covering these stories, again, especially these curriculum transparency bills, and just parroting the talking points of the union, saying, these bills are censorship, they're harassment. I mean, even the idea of saying that transparency is somehow censorship and that our public schools should be able to teach stuff in secret. And we're seeing this, like you said, it's not just the sort of big national outlets that you'd expect, but also a lot of these state outlets as well. And some of the tactics they're taking, there's a story recently from our home state where the local newspaper literally doctored a quote from a teacher because the newspaper had botched the reporting on it, realized that their quote didn't quite line up, and so they literally took out words in the middle of her quote, made it say something totally different just so it would still fit their narrative and slam parents and their ability to get this information.
Speaking to Matt Beienburg, the Director of Education Policy at the Goldwater Institute, got a brand new article up on the Washington Times. Mainstream media fuel the war on parents by misleading on teachers' curriculum transparency. Matt, how bizarre is it for the media to not just report the facts on this, to be actually taking sides? Parents all across the country have stood up at their school board meetings. Many of them are now running for school board and saying, I want more accountability. I want more transparency. What is in this? You say you're not teaching critical race theory. What are you teaching? Give us your materials. Let us look at that. And the school districts, which are completely funded, we're talking about public education here, funded entirely by the taxpayers, are saying, no, we don't have to do that. And how bizarre is that, Matt, for the media to be taking that side of the coin? Kind of turns the First Amendment upside down on its head, doesn't it?
It is bizarre. And, we've heard a million times from the media, as you said, right, them telling us all CRT, critical race theory, is not taught anywhere in K-12 schools. We've heard it from MSNBC We've heard it from all the, again, national and local outlets. And yet we have the National Education Association, which is the nation's largest teachers union. They themselves explicitly put out a resolution this past summer calling for infusing CRT into K-12 curriculum. You know, we have examples across the country, and yet the media have, again, lined up on this narrative of saying there's nothing to see here. Parents are just out of line, and there's no actual problem here, and pushing that narrative. So now, when there's this effort to say, okay, you're telling us nothing questionable, nothing about CRT, nothing political is being taught in a way that may not be appropriate for K-12 education, you know, sort of put your money where your mouth is and let parents see it. And they react with this incredibly defensive posture, saying, you know, you're just attacking and censoring education, and just seeing the tactics that they put out there. You know, they've called these bills teacher abuse, again, censorship, harassment, when at the end of the day, these are practices that teachers around the country have already said, hey, look, we're posting our materials on Google Classroom each week. So these bills, and now there's a couple, I think a new one just got introduced in Missouri a week or so back, SB 1225, that would say, hey, let's have our schools very simply post the information that's out there so parents can see it and know what's being taught and not have to rely on this false media narrative that's being peddled.
Absolutely. Matt, we'll have to have you back sometime for a longer segment. We appreciate your work on this. And, you know, Matt, I think you've uncovered something. And I think the folks on the other side of this equation, they doth protest too much. Follow Matt, Beienburg, GoldwaterInstitute.com. Mainstream media fuel war on parents by misleading on teachers' curriculum transparency. Matt, thanks for all your hard work on this. Appreciate you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yes.